Hello and welcome aboard, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Captain Kib, signing on today, and today we're going to be talking about the LCT-1V Locust. It's a light class battle mech and weighs in at approximately 20 or so tons. It has a cruising speed of 86 kilometers per hour and a top speed of 129 kilometers per hour. This makes the mech, pretty gosh darn fast. Like most lights that we're going to talk about, say for like the Irby, but even then you can make modifications to speed the little fucker up. The LCT-1V is designed for, fast scouting and attacking maneuvers. Now, it is armed with one medium Martel laser and two spray Browning machine guns, bearing in mind, you can always switch those out for different weapons depending on what hard points you have and what variant. But for the standard airship variant, the two spray Browning machine guns, you're going to find a little bit woeful in the video game adaptations. There's a couple of reasons for this, and that has to do with how critical damage is normally done. For instance, in tabletop, you have machine guns and you just sort of shoot into the armor, or the internal structure, I should say, and it has a chance to do a lot of fucking damage. It stacks quite nicely, and in a lot of the video games, it doesn't really work that way, but the machine guns in a lower sort of standpoint do act as fantastic, tears up light vehicles, light armored things, infantry gets fucking ravaged by them. Like most things, infantry is just kind of sad about existing, and I do not particularly blame them. But the LCT-1V Locust makes a fan-fucking-tastic scout. It is fast enough to keep up, it is, very maneuverable in terms of its speed. Now, I wouldn't recommend putting jump jets on it just due to the tonnage, because again, you'll be sacrificing a little bit of that armor, but, that's up to your risk, obviously, when you're playing with the LCT-1V. You're going to find it kind of squishy, but as far as lights go, it's by no means a flea. It is by far superior. While the flea may be cute and ugly as hell, the Locust is a ugly little shit that if you see it, you're going to be slightly annoyed, because you're going to find that most Locusts will always replace those Sperry Browning machine guns with something a little bit more devastating, like flamers or lasers or something of that nature to do a little bit more heat or actual damage. Now, it was created in 2499, and you'll find the little fuckers everywhere. The Locust is easy to manufacture. I mean, like, easy. It is borderline, it almost puts the fleet to shame. It's a very popular choice. You'll find a lot of places, even the inner sphere, the outer, or the deep periphery, and the periphery itself has Locusts all over the place. They're easy to produce, easy to come by. The parts aren't that hard to make. Still manufacturing them in the Succession War period. You're going to find that Locusts are in abundant supply, and they're not particularly hard to manufacture because it's a relatively simplistic design by comparison to, let's say mediums or heavies, but most lights in general, throughout the Succession Wars and towards the latter end, will find themselves kind of very frontline-ish and being produced en masse, but that has to do with the fact that, again, the entire Inner Sphere believed, lightning-quick warfare in the first Succession War, like, bam! The entire purpose of the first Succession War was to quickly seize the throne, to quickly seize the First Lordship and basically declare themselves the next First Lord, and basically the new heir to the Star League. However, as that would later prove that lightning strategy quite didn't work out. In fact, it was so devastating, lightning jumping in sector to sector, to planet, fucking glassing everything in sight, and preemptively striking any SLDF planets that they couldn't secure with just nukes. I mean, that's actually a common tactic. Not to delve too far into that, but to explain why lights were very popular in the early Succession Wars was because, again, the lost technology to produce mediums and due to the fact that the Terran hegemony didn't want to quite share that knowledge, and the Terran hegemony, by extent, was the Star League. But that is a story for another time. One thing to note that the Locust has in its favor, however, is the fact that it is a fairly armored mech. That was one of the reasons why it was so preferred, even though it's, centuries-old design even later on, before the Succession Wars finally hit. The Locust had quite a bit of speed and was also quite capable of taking quite a punch by comparison to a lot of the other lights, like the Flea, who really cannot take any sort of punishment. The Locust, on the other hand, can actually take a fair bit of beating, and for those of you who've fought them in the game or tabletop, you'll find that the Locust is rather durable. And for the speed trade-off, it's actually a very popular mech, based on the fact that it can scout, and you can be risky with it. It is by fucking everything I personally think is a very sturdy mech. as far as lights go. And by light standards, that's not saying a whole heck of a lot, though. But by light standards, it's fast, and it's very well armored for being as fast as it is, which makes it fan-fucking-tastic at sprinting around, and, discovering enemy positions, locking them, popping things in the back, weaker targets, infantry, vehicles. Again, this mech you're going to find enjoyable to play if you are into the fast mech, but you don't really like the armor of the Flea, the fact that it's flimsy, its armor practically doesn't exist. The Locust kind of can take a fair bit of punishment. It can withstand a direct alpha strike from a king crab, depending on what the king crab's firing, but for the most part, it'll probably still be able to move. Now remember, with lights, I'm going to stress this in every single video because this is something that I myself make mistakes on. But that's because I'm not a particularly good light player, bear that in mind. Lights are maneuverable. That is their shtick. The whole idea of a light is to move around and have maneuverability over, DACA and armor. And basically it's the, death by 1,000 fucking cuts. Not like the Flea, like the prior mech we talked about earlier, in which it's death by 1,000 cuts from 1,000 fleas. But the Locust is, death by 1,000 cuts of just leaping in and out. In fact, one of the preferred environments, I have to say, with the Locust, and one of the most effective environments I've seen it ever in action, in any sort of instance in the lore or the video game adaptations or even hell tabletop, is in urban environments. Now, it's also pretty good in open terrain due to the sheer speed, but this little fucker can just zoom in and zoom out of freaking every gosh darn alleyway and major street. It can move fast, and that sheer speed can make it lethal. Do not underestimate this in an urban environment. In fact, I'd be fucking more worried about this than coming across a king crab if I was in a lighter mech. The thing is, if you come across an assault mech in an urban environment, more than likely you'll be able to get out of the combat situation by just ducking out and just, trying to break contact, which isn't that hard due to all the sheer amount of cover. However, the Locust will hunt mediums down, and will hunt down even some of the other lights that are slightly heavier, that can't move as quickly. Locust is pretty gosh darn fast, and it's goddamn fucking kawaii is what it is. It is a beautiful mech, it is fantastic, it's quite a big staple of the franchise for its versatility. And by far, it's one of my favorite lights, besides the meme that is the Irby-chan, and the Commando, and a few others that we'll get to in a bit. But not to procrastinate too much on the other mechs, because we're talking about the LCT-1V. Now, this is mostly just a tabletop thing. Unfortunately, the video games don't have a system. I cannot stress how much it bothers me that melee is not a functioning mechanic in the Mech Warrior franchise. I mean, I get it would be hard to implement, but the idea of having melee combat is actually kind of important based on the fact that it's used quite frequently, both tabletop and heavily in the lore. You'd be surprised. Grabbing parts of mechs and tearing parts off is quite devastating. Now, you're probably asking me right now, what the heck? What is the Locust gonna do? Kick things? Well, yes, it can punt tanks and step on infantry. It could kick the shin of a friggin' Atlas, which will probably punch it in the face and kill it. But, that point aside, it is capable of not really doing melee quite well. That is one thing important to note for the tabletop playing, or if you're playing a role-playing game of that nature. The Locust doesn't have arms, and I'm going to start mentioning this now because, again, I feel like it's kind of urgent after playtesting Battletech and realizing how sucky it is to be incapable of melee in a situation where you really, really, really could use some arms. Not having arms is quite detrimental to the mech, and it does affect it in a lot of ways. For example, they can't grab things, they can't smash things. Getting up is a little bit more difficult, especially in terms of books. They do talk about how these mechs struggle to right themselves when they keel over, and that's one of the things that is an earlier design, because you'd see in a lot of earlier or later designs that introduction of hands or just arms in general that can prop themselves up with their own batteries and weaponry, bearing in mind that in some cases propping themselves up with that will damage or destroy the weapon in question, or make the barrel bent, which is bad, depending on what's happening. If you get stepped on, or for example a mech jumps on your back, then you are going to be in another bucket of trouble. And I think that's one thing you'll have to worry about a lot less. When you're in a situation where mech's pounding on you from above, you're going to be in a bit of a dire strait, to say the absolute least. One of the interesting things that it plays in a tactical role in a lot of the inner sphere states, and even in the periphery, is it is quite often used on the front. Now, most lights are used in terms of like scouting and things like that, and while it can be used for that, it's actually used for kind of a different tactical role in terms of how, their warfare functions. They use it for really dealing with breakthroughs. But for example, let's say they threw like a ton of fleas, right? You threw a Locust in there, a lance of lights like that, escorted with a couple Locusts, and bam, that should clean it up real quick. They're fast respond units. They're pretty much, think of them as the first responders when an enemy breakthrough happens. You'll commonly see the Locust applied here, because again, it's got the speed to get to the area where that's having a breakthrough, and it's normally assumed, tactically, that the enemy force breaking through did take some damage, so the Locust is just there to, stall it up, stop it from turning into a mass en route, which is, devastating. Because again, if you lose your positioning in the Battletech games or the Battletech video games, positioning is key, and the entire front line, if a front line collapses, you're going to lose a lot more assets than you normally would in our own world. For instance, you know how the front line collapses and you lose wounded, perhaps a lot more prisoners and POWs will be taken, units will get encircled. In this universe, because mechs are so fast and so nimble and able to maneuver terrain so much better than the ground vehicles, you could cut off entire armored companies, like company upon company, division upon division of infantry, because they would not be able to maneuver that well, because they do rely on a lot of limiting factors with the tracked vehicles and the wheeled vehicles. Even the hovercraft have some limitations to what they can and cannot do. Certain mountains, certain hills, certain environments, versus mechs can just sort of plow through it. And this is what makes them which is what makes breakthroughs so dangerous. Is because you can lose a lot of military assets, not to mention support vehicles, which are extremely rare and very hard to produce in the Succession Wars. Making sure you don't have a frontline collapse and an enemy encirclement happen, much like the encirclement in our own universe with the 6th Army and Stalingrad, and that was how devastating. I mean, it was devastating, but it didn't really cause the end of the war. But that's a debate for a whole nother story. A whole nother fucking historical reference. But yeah. Having something to fill the gaps with these breakthroughs happening. Now, bear in mind, there's always reserve divisions and reserve companies of different mechs and lances ready to rock and roll. But you'll commonly see Locusts applied into a lot of situations. Think of it as like the quick, duct tape to a problem. Slap a few Locusts on it, problem solved. That'll stall for the time for the front line to readjust to prevent it from making a major breakthrough and seizing a lot of armor and equipment, which would be horrendous for the attacking or defending force. Locusts make phenomenal patchwork, if you will, in terms of military strategy. Another thing we do need to discuss is the fact that they are used in a higher abundance in certain areas in the Battletech lore in the universe. For example, in the periphery, you're probably going to stumble across a lot more Locusts on the front line because, again, they're easy to produce, they're, very reliable as far as lights go, and they're one of the stronger lights out there because they got that maneuverability, they can hit and they can get out of an area normally before damage gets too critical. Bearing in mind, like most lights, if their legs go, GG, you're fucking dead, mate. Like, you're better off punching out or popping the cockpit open and being like, fucking bending the knee, don't fucking blast my ass, because you're gonna be friggin' sad if you get lit up. That is the one thing to bear in mind. Now, there's another thing also that they're also used, not just in the periphery, but for cheaper merc companies. They're relatively cheap to maintain, and the parts are in a, extreme abundant supply. Small merc companies and individual mercenaries, especially errant knights that, patrol the periphery worlds, and some of the solo interstellar governments as, protectors of colonies and things like that, you'll see commonly use Locusts because they're cheap, easy to maintain. Most pirates don't have their own mechs and mech lances in most cases. That's the bigger upper pirates. Remember, mechs are hard to come by. And when mechs, if they have a fucking lance, that pirate company probably has a few tank divisions as well, and is pretty much like a small army. Honestly, pirates in the Battletech is worth its own well, it is worth its own lore video. They have so much about them, but not to dilly-dally in that. You'll see Locusts also applied in them. I mean, again, common, easy to acquire, and still to this day, even after the Third Succession War, very easy and abundant. They are reliable, sturdy, fast, the whole spiel. You'll find them in abundance in those areas, but you'll still see them in the inner sphere. You'll see them everywhere. They are practical mechs. I can't honestly stress it enough. You are probably, if you've played any of the Mech Warrior games, if you've played Mech Warrior Online, you've probably seen a fair few of these things, just to say. By and large, the Locust is probably one of the higher end mechs, is what I consider in terms of lights. And that's just personal preference. Again, all of these mechs are viable, but just bear in mind, when you're playing the video game or the tabletop, or hell, just reading the books, it's all about your flavor and your play style. Again, there's a mech out there for almost any playstyle. If you like being a heavy tank and just bashing it out and brawling, fucking grab as an assault. If you kind of want a mix of that with that heavier weaponry, but you still kind of want, you know, some maneuverability, you'll grab a heavy or a medium. And then lights are for the, you know, fast, quick on your toes characters, or people who like to play fast. There's a mech out there for everyone, almost. You got your sniper mechs, you got all sorts of stuff. And the Locust fits in quite well. It fits quite well into the light category because, again, it is a nice mech for beginner light players, I think. In fact, honestly, I highly recommend it. If you haven't tried lights or light mechs, they are quite fun. And while I may not be the best at lights, because, again, talking to now, I'm sure there's too many of us out here, but there's a ton of assault players who just likes to get in the biggest, meanest fucking Daka machine fucking mech out there and just give them hell. And I'm also a fair bit into the heavies and here and there, well, medium or two, but I'm not really super into the lights. But one thing I did enjoy is, I gotta say, I did enjoy my experience in the Locust. It's got the maneuverability, it's got speed, and that, it's got fair enough armor, so it's not like, you know, some of the lights where they just get popped and like, kind of lame. You get the best of kind of both worlds, but at the same time, you have both things, but you're the master of none of them. You're the jack of all trades in terms of lights, but master of none. That's right. That's the phrase they use. But yeah, all in all, LCT-1V Locust is an excellent light beginner mech. In fact, if you're going to try lights, ride an LCT-1V. That thing will be a blast. I guarantee you. You'll at least be running into walls because it moves so fast in the video games. And in the tabletop, you'll find that little fucker just zooming across the battlefield, being absolutely annoying, just racking up its evasion and just getting every fucking shot missed around. Fuck that little thing. Fuck it out of existence. It's absolutely annoying. But when you see one of those, oh boy, they're a special case of special. Nothing like a spider, but, you know, pretty up there. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this will conclude today's little brief excerpt into the mech bay of the Locust LCT-1V. We will kind of keep doing these kinds of videos, and I will try to make them a little bit quicker. Now, this probably sounds a little weird because I'm a little bit... How could I say this? I guess I'm recording on my phone because I'm kind of on, you know, vacation, so you'll have to excuse the fact that the audio might sound a little wonky, but I should be back by the time this video is up. So until then, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to seeing you in more mech videos. Until then.
Yippee-yay, there'll be no wedding bells for today. I got spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle,
Jingle jangle,
as I go riding merrily along.
jingle jangle,
And they sing, oh, ain't you glad you're single?
jingle jangle,
And that song ain't so very far from wrong.
jingle jangle,
Oh, Lily Bell,
oh lily bell,
oh, Lily Bell,
oh lily bell.
though I may have done some fooling, this is why I never fell. 'Cause I got spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle,
Jingle jangle,
as I go riding merrily along.
jingle jangle,
And they sing, oh, ain't you glad you're single?
jingle jangle,
And that song ain't so very far from wrong.
jingle jangle.